What's up? We're back with a deep dive on episode 2 of True Detective season 1, titled Seeing Things. The race to solve the Dora Lang murder is still ongoing, and we ended episode 1 with Rust and Marty finding those stick sculptures at Marie Fontenot's aunt and uncle's house. The aunt doesn't know what they are, maybe something Marie made in school. The school did close down in 1992 though after Hurricane Andrew.
I love the way this one kicks off too. We get that dual monologue of both the detectives from a philosophical angle, and we fall deeper and deeper into the sinister world that was built up in episode 1.
So let's get into the case. Now that Dora Lang has been ID'd, it's time to notify her mom. Dora's mom, Kelly, is obviously devastated, and she answers some questions about Dora. We learn that Dora didn't have a great relationship with her father.
Why wouldn't a father bathe his own child?
Her father died back in 1984 from a rollover crash on a highway near Rowan, Oklahoma. According to her mom, Dora has always been troubled as a child, but she did come by to see her mom about a month ago. It seemed like Dora was doing better and she'd been going to some church. When Marty asked the mom where the church was, a sudden onset of brutal headaches hit Dora's mom and she can't answer. Apparently she worked in dry cleaning for 20 years and the constant chemical exposure has given her severe health problems.
You can tell right away that they probably see her as a lost cause as far as further info goes. You got the hysterics, the pills, the sob story, all the above. They could all be true to an extent, but you can tell this is also setting off the bullshit detector for Rust especially. It almost looks like she's faking it to avoid the rest of the questioning, or she's carrying a lot more secrets embedded with trauma than first meets the eye here. This continues the string of people we see in the show tangentially involved with the case whose lives are either marred by tragedy or are less than fully put together, shall we say. There is a weird ass picture that catches the eye pretty much immediately. After browsing some Reddit boards, doing some independent research, and staring into nothingness like our boy Rust for a while, a few key points became clear. This is actually a pic from a Mardi Gras type celebration that happens out in the sticks in the bayou area. The dudes are also wearing masks though and surrounding what appears to be a young Dora. Even if these two groups are not really connected as the perpetrators of the crime, the foreshadowing is off-putting to say the least.
No sir, I don't like it.
The next stop is to see Dora's friend Carla. Remember back in episode 1, Charlie Lang told Rust and Marty that Carla was Dora's friend and she's the one who put Dora back in touch with Charlie. Carla hasn't seen Dora much since the previous summer, but she says that Dora looked thin and seemed high on drugs. Dora told Carla that she found a church, but Carla still doesn't think she looked right. Unfortunately, Carla doesn't know where the church was, but she did say that Dora mentioned staying someplace near Spanish Lake at some sort of shelter for girls. So Russ then pulls up to this motel to meet up with Lucy from the truck stop. He ends up getting some pills from Lucy and some valuable information. There's this trailer park place south of Spanish Lake called The Ranch. A lot of girls work in prostitution and stay there. This is the second time Spanish Lake is mentioned, so obviously a visit to the ranch is now in the works. Rust and Marty don't know where the ranch is specifically though, so they gotta do a little bit of gritty detective work to find it. Since prostitution is illegal, the locals near Spanish Lake aren't gonna just willingly give up the location of the ranch. Fortunately, Rust is well versed in next level interrogation tactics, so he gets the information anyways.
From a legacy perspective, this goes down as a top 3 Rust scene of all time. When he goes back in and beats the hell out of those boys, you got a deeper sense that he is a bad man who isn't afraid to play by street rules. Kind of wild that Marty is still smelling his fingers post-affair throughout Rust going on this roadhouse rampage. Iconic scene though.
So our detectives pull up to the ranch and the madam confirms that Dora Lang used to work there. They meet another girl working there named Beth who knew Dora. When Beth first arrived at the ranch, Dora gave her tips on how to handle the sex work life. Beth has no idea where Dora could have been, but she does mention that Dora had been going to church. Dora did happen to leave a bag back at the ranch, and Beth gives the bag to Rust. Also, side note, Marty calls out the madam because it's obvious that Beth isn't 18. He tries to lecture her on how sex work isn't right for a girl who's underage, but the madam fires back, saying it's a woman's body and it's a woman's choice.
No matter what your feelings on that convo are, the bio borders on debaucherous hellhole every step of the way here. We're going to touch upon it later, but I love watching Marty unravel when the hypocrisy behind his whole thesis gets called out. Kind of funny to see him on his heels a bit.
Got underage working here?
What do you know about where that girl's been?
There's a certain humanity given to the whole prostitute ring and scene during the shot. Do these girls really have a lot of other options when they come through such horrendous situations? Can you justify selling a woman's body if she's given a certain amount of autonomy in the process? Ultimately, these questions are way above my pay grade. However, this place does give you the creeps, like if there was a brothel in the Hills Have Eyes. Marty acting like he's a savior of women's rights is pretty interesting, given Marty's history in this episode. Rust is not afraid to point out the irony either.
Got a down payment.
To highlight the sadness and tragedy behind the setup that these girls have, in another scene from the episode, Lucy, the prostitute from the truck stop's bedroom, looks like a kid's room in a way. It gives the vibe that some of these girls have been snatched from a borderline childhood state and put into a much darker and greasier world. One thing this show does in spades is cast despair and darkness on its setting and revealing kind of the inner tragedy behind what's going on the surface.
So our man Russ starts reading Dora's diary and finds her writing about a yellow king of a place named Carcosa. Russ speculates that the murderer was slowly upping her dosage of drugs without her knowing. In her diary, they also find a flyer for a local church revival event.
It's a lot like the fire danger meter from Smokey the Bear they used to use back in the day. The more times you see religion or a church pop up in connection to a murder or a mystery, it just makes the muscles in your shoulder get tight because you know some fuckery is definitely afoot. Religion and the church being embedded within this case more and more just keeps on making sense. Everyone around here craves some kind of salvation for the choices they've made or for the hardships in their own lives to get through them. Dora's path seems particularly grim every time we get a new clue, hoping to get some answers to it soon.
At this point, the governor's office, aka Edwin Tuttle, has sent a separate task force that volunteers to take on the Dora Lang case themselves. As a result, Rust and Marty gotta fill these guys in on all the details they have on the case. Rust isn't happy about it, but Major Quesada tells him to shut the fuck up and do it.
God damn, Cole, how many ways are there for me to say, shut the fuck up?
This task force could take the case off of their department's desk, which would allow them to go back to solving easier cases and keeping their clearance rate high. Marty manages to convince Quesada to give them till the rest of the month, which is about 2 weeks.
Rewatching the season, there are a lot of moments when the scene transitions really hit. A little poetic that we transition from this to the present day Marty, as he's just starting to realize the plan to put this on Rust. The system strikes back.
Just trying to track the case. How Cole worked it, especially.
It's also a pivotal moment for the case back in the 90s. The difference in how Marty and Cole are reacting to the politics of the system isn't actually as different as you might think at first, because you can tell on Marty's face and the laugh that he gave Cole's comment that he wasn't wholeheartedly sold on the idea of passing off the files either. Caught off guard, but plays by the book in the end because he knows he pretty much has to. In this world, Marty gets along more easily and Cole struggles to feel out the situations because he can't contain his idealism. Also, he can come across as a major asshole at times, for sure. However, I love that Marty has been partially radicalized by Rust. Both of these guys are bad influences, but somehow they're good for each other. I don't even know how that's possible.
So Rust and Marty try to find the church from the flyer in Dora's bag, and they do find an old church building that's been destroyed by a fire instead. The place is spooky as hell and looks trashed, but right before they leave, Rust discovers a painting of a naked woman with deer antlers on the wall.
A nice combination of creepy yet beautiful shots in the abandoned church sequence. We have another appearance from the ominous spiral, acid flashback, or something more. The first time I saw this reveal, I almost jumped out of my chair, eerie as hell. And you have the comic relief from the soundtrack and Rust's reveal that he thought his drug-induced hallucinations were offering him secrets to the universe, or some shit. Again though, another episode closes with Cole pulling up from deep to tie the game.
So that's pretty much it for the progression of the case in this episode, but let's talk a bit more about Rust and Marty. With every episode, we learn more about them as individuals and what makes them tick. Rust is the type of guy who'll never volunteer information about himself, so you really have to pull it out. We learn a lot about these guys from their taped interviews with the two detectives in 2012. Also, these two detectives are Gilbo and Papania. Actually, his name might be Gilbao, but fuck it.
Yeah, it all starts with that first mashup toward the beginning to kick off the dueling points of view for these dudes. We start with a recurring idea of what the job does to the man and what the man is apart from the job. Marty's tone from the jump is more relaxed and ho-hum, where it's clear that Russ is more self-aware and thoughtful about the question presented.
So let's start with Russ' life story and what we learn about it. We know that his relationship with his parents is complicated. In '95, he doesn't know if his mom is still alive. His dad is from Alaska and served in Nam. With no family, Russ just lives solo and works the case, nothing to come home to. Russ does end up telling Marty about his late daughter. Apparently she died when she was 2 in a car accident. A small bonding moment when Rust actually reveals some super personal stuff to Marty. We get more details of how this went down when he's talking to the detectives in 2012. Apparently his daughter's name is Sophia, and she was riding her tricycle in the driveway when a car hit her and sent her into a coma where she died later on.
What really stands out is the line from Rust where he talks about his daughter's death and the impression that it left on him. It's beautiful, it's a bit out there, and heartbreaking all at once. In his mind, it's an ugly and a brutal world.
You know what? What she was spared. Sometimes I feel grateful.
Yeah, and in the 2012 timeline, we learned that Rust almost got remarried to a woman named Lori, who Maggie introduced him to. The relationship didn't last because Rust, self-admittedly, is a fucking miserable person. He doesn't blame the job for making him this way. He just is this way. In 2012, Rust knows who he is. He's a man who works 4 nights a week and drinks in between. He lives by himself in a small room, and he doesn't feel bad about being who he is. Let's talk a bit about Rust's career and how it progressed. He spent 4 years undercover working in a high-intensity drug trafficking area. It's a long time to be exposed to that many drugs, so Rust was still getting random visions even after his undercover stint was over. Before his daughter's death, Rust was working in the robbery division. The tragic event caused him to transfer to narcotics, where he just went hard 24/7. Within 3 months, he was either robbing drug couriers or ending up in shady motel rooms with 8 balls of coke. At one point, Rust killed a crankhead for injecting his infant daughter with crystal meth. That obviously screwed him, and the state attorney gave him one chance to stay out of jail, become a deep undercover narco, and go do whatever some agency or department needs. There was no end date for Rust, so he was basically a slave to that department. After 4 years, in February of '93, Rust ended up in a shootout in the Port of Houston where he killed 3 cartel members, but also took 3 shots to the side. He ended up at the North Shore Psychiatric Hospital in Lubbock, Texas for 4 months. Now, Rust did get offered psych pension, which would have been the jackpot, but this man said no. He asked to be in the homicide division, and Louisiana is what they had, so that's where he met Marty.
You got some idea how my wife's pussy's supposed to smell?
Rust's experiences have contributed to him having visions, insomnia, and paranoia.
Through everything Chen just said, Rust lays all the cards out. For me, the episode helped fill in the cracks and actually deliver that epiphany as to why he's just so damn different. The man has lived through hell already. To go through what he already has and still be functioning is a miracle in itself. He just kept chasing the high to dull the low, and he got used by the system in the process. This is where his life devolves into a whirlwind, and you can see a little bit of understanding and sympathy enter the eyes of the detectives taking a statement after that happens. He's lived a few lives already, but the first one is the one his mind tries the hardest to hold on to. It's easy to see why he would be so critical of Marty for throwing away a good family when he himself had his ripped from him unwillingly too soon, and we do learn about his loose acquaintanceship with religion. It's pretty out of the ordinary to see a guy use this in a way where religion is just a sounding board or a more academic study of moralism without really buying into it. He wanted to remain part of life, part of society, or just part of a team again.
The body is not one member, but many.
Either way, this man is still looking for something, even if it is just purpose. All the contradictions he has as a character are just something that I've never seen before. It's pretty awesome. And I say that because it makes him seem so real.
So let's move on to Marty. In terms of family life, Marty grew up in a pretty solid home. He describes his mom as a Donna Reed type, a loving mom that packed school lunches and read bedtime stories to her children. Marty's dad was a Marine who served in Korea, never talked about his problems or feelings. He was just the typical hard-nosed dad. Marty was way bigger than his dad and still felt like his dad would always kick his ass. Marty has a family in '95, but just look at these eyes. This is a man who isn't truly enjoying his family. His mind is somewhere else. He's always got to decompress before being a family man. This is a man who obviously has 1 foot in and 1 foot out. So now we got to cover Marty's infidelity since it's an important aspect of his character development. He's cheating on Maggie with this smoking hot young court reporter named Lisa. Go watch this scene if you haven't seen it before, and if you have seen it before, go rewatch it for the 10th time for research purposes. Just an awesome scene already. Also, Marty eats ass, and I cannot blame this man.
There is falling into temptation, and then there's pulling up to your side piece's house with a bottle of Captain and a pair of handcuffs while you have a wife and 2 kids at home. Somebody stop this man. Someone please stop this man.
Was that a yes?
I might stay up.
Wow.
He spends the episode putting on a scumbag highlight reel in many spots. Scene transitions are on point again as usual. It's no coincidence that we see the scenes of Rust and Lucy intertwined with Marty and Lisa's hookup. Rust has iron resolve with this type of temptation at least, where Marty just doesn't. Just another situation where these guys are a good foil for each other.
You could see how dissatisfied Marty is with his family life when they visit Maggie's parents. It's supposed to be a nice weekend with the in-laws, but Marty cuts it short. When Maggie's father is doing the classic old man rant about things being better back in my day, Marty just crushes him.
You know, throughout history, I bet every old man probably said the same thing. And old men die, and the world keeps spinning.
The marriage is clearly struggling because even Maggie's mom can see that. Maggie can tell that Marty's heart isn't into the marriage. There's this tough scene where they're arguing while Maggie is making dinner.
As a character, I actually like Marty a lot because there's some redeeming qualities to him, but in this situation, he is just so damn selfish. To try to play up the horrors of his job for pity, to accuse his wife of then self-pity.
You want me to tell you about the kids disappearing, and maybe you'll stop with the poor me little whiny bullshit?
I don't know how much more of that slow motion train wreck I could watch. Marty does give us a line at the start of the episode about seeing the old days is tougher. Then he turns around and gives Maggie's dad shit about his train of thinking. Marty just wants to get back to his job. You can see it from all of his mannerisms, from every time he spends too much time away from it. He likes the chaos that it holds, and he likes the excuses that it allows him to make for himself as well. Part of the big issue with Marty is that we don't really know what he stands for back in the 90s because most of his actions have to do with relieving his stresses by running away from his deeper issues. It's a half-assed attempt at being a father and playing a husband that contains more manipulation than actual partnership with his wife. He's not a total lost cause though. He does seem caring at certain moments. He looks out for Rust pretty frequently. Still not his finest series of moments from this episode.
The last thing we gotta mention is this near fight between Rust and Marty. Since it's the first sign of physical conflict that erupts, it starts in the locker room when Rust calls Marty out for sleeping around and makes a slight comment that Marty takes as disrespect to Maggie.
Are you saying that's wife? The high tide you walking in with?
The comment isn't really that bad, and Marty overreacts since he's obviously feeling guilty. He pushes Rust against the locker and threatens to beat his ass, but Rust has his wrists in a lock and basically says, "Get the fuck off of me before I break your wrist."
On the surface, it seems like a pissing contest, but when you actually slow it down and take a look in here, it's pretty complex. Rust is all about the case at hand because that's what keeps him sane-ish, and Marty is struggling to bounce back from his poor-ass decision-making, which he uses as a coping mechanism to also keep himself sane. He can't admit what's really going on, and Rust, being a detective through and through, has zero misgivings as to where the truth lies. This is the first real confrontation between the two. Clearly, it's a sensitive subject to Marty, but it feels like he's projecting his own insecurities related to the infidelity he's been enjoying. Rust also shows that he gives no fucks about feelings in most situations. Just a quick pulse check here at the end. Totally normal behavior.
Well, that does it for our episode 2 breakdown. We've now gotten some clues from the destroyed church, so we'll see where those clues lead us to. We'll be back with our episode 3 breakdown next, so stay tuned. Appreciate everyone for watching.